Well, returning now to the SNP, which is beginning the search for a new leader, as Leo was just mentioning, to replace Humza Yousaf, who resigned yesterday. Well, the SNP's Westminster leader, Stephen Flynn, is here with me. A very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
What have you personally learned from the last 10 days?
It's been tough for all of us. I'm obviously quite close with Humza, as indeed are so many others in the SNP, and he's dealt yesterday with the class and the dignity of the challenges he's faced. He's dealt with it with class and dignity, as is always the case. He's a man of integrity and compassion. I'm just very sorry that it's came to this.
What was the trigger?
The trigger, of course, was the ending of the Butte House agreement and the manner
The way it was done?
Yeah, the way it was done. I mean, Humza said that yesterday himself. I actually support ending the Butte House agreement. I think the public support ending the Butte House agreement because the SNP needs to be back in the space of talking about jobs and the economy and the NHS and dealing with the cost of living crisis within the confines of devolution. We've probably not been in that space for a wee while now. So Humza wanted to have a reset. Just the manner in which that happened, of course, is set hairs running within the Green Party, and the consequences are there for all to see.
Is John Swinney the man to reunite things?
I think so. These are serious times. Serious times deserve serious politicians, and they don't get much more serious than John Swinney. He's not just serious, but he's the best person that we have. He's vastly experienced. He's incredibly in touch with the public and their values. And I've got no doubt that if he does put himself forward, because I'm, like many others, trying to encourage him to do so, he'll be able to take Scotland on to a much better future.
If anybody else considers themselves as a potential candidate, you should have a proper race, or should they pipe down, as it were, at the moment?
No, it's up to party members to decide whether they want to put themselves forward and whether they'd be able to garner the support to go into a contest. We're a democratic party. I'm very proud of that. We had a leadership contest last year, which I'm sure everyone remembers. Some of us remember a little bit too much. But look, it'll be for members to decide what happens. But I'm very keen to see John put himself forward because I believe he's the best person to take us forward.
I'm interested in terms of how you define the party outside of its central aim. Which, of course, is independence. And that's clearly been a uniting factor, and it is perhaps the only factor that matters when things are going well. When the wheels fall off a little bit, other cracks emerge. And I just wonder how you define the party. Is it a centre-left, centre-right, centre-left?
Of course, we're a centre-left party, and we've got a proud record in that regard. We've got the most progressive taxation system in the UK. We spend an inordinate amount of money, maybe even more if we could, on the journey to net zero, because it is the right thing to do in order to combat climate change and create jobs for the future. And of course, we're very focused on making sure that we lift children out of poverty, which is why we have the likes of the Scottish Child Payment, which has lifted 100,000 children out of poverty in Scotland, a benefit that doesn't exist anywhere else on these isles. So those are the core values of the SNP. What we now need to do is that we meet the challenge that's in front of us, the biggest issues facing the public, because this is all about the public. The decision Humza took was in the public interest and the national interest, and a new leader can take us forward on that platform.
And then to the central point, independence, do you think your party does better when independence feels close or when it feels further away again, which I think it's fair to say is the case today compared to 3 or 4 years ago?
And this is one of the interesting things, is it not? Because if we look at opinion polls, indeed there was an opinion poll out just yesterday, which, by the way, shows us having a healthy lead in Scottish voting intentions for Holyrood over the Labour Party, despite all the challenges we faced. But on the independence number, we're still roughly 50-50. So we know the Scottish people have a mindset where they want to become independent, but what they want to see their government do is to deal with the immediate challenges of today, which, as I say, is the economy, the NHS and the cost of living crisis. And then you'll have that natural progression to becoming an independent nation.
It's interesting you mentioned the poll that gives you a lead. You know what my next question is going to be, that whoever takes over, and whenever that is, in weeks or months, should there be an immediate election?
I don't think so. I think the public are crying out for stability, and of course they don't see that at the moment. And the difference between Westminster and Holyrood and Westminster and the Welsh Senedd is that in Westminster we don't elect, and MPs don't elect who the Prime Minister is. In Holyrood, they do. There will be a vote within Holyrood, depending on who the SNP put in place as First Minister, just as there was a vote just the other week in the Welsh Senedd for Vaughan Gething to become the First Minister of Wales. I think his coat's on a sugly peg, though, so there might be another vote there as well in the not-too-distant future. But the reality is the systems in the devolved nations are slightly different to Westminster, and we need to respect that.
That said, explicitly, after Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister, many members of the SNP, and very clearly the party as a whole, and Nicola Sturgeon at the time, said that he had no mandate to govern. Will the next SNP's leader, given it's not the first change of leader during this Parliament, this Scottish Parliament, have less of a mandate to govern?
Well, I don't believe so on the basis of what I've said there. The Westminster system is entirely different to the system which is in place in the devolved nations, where the parliamentarians themselves will have to vote to elect a First Minister. And when they do so, they'll be doing so on the basis of the election results as they were in 2021. Now, for my part, I believe John Swinney is the best person to put himself into that role. I hope that he does, because he has the experience, huge experience, vast experience in government. He ran the public finances, he ran our education system. He's someone who can unite right across the political divides, because we've now got a minority government, and the reality is that the public will expect parties from across the different political boundaries to come together to look for common purpose, common ground, common investment in public services, and hopefully John can be the person to make sure that we go onto that front footing that the public wants to see.
What's your response to people to say it's men in grey suits picking the leader then?
I mean, that's moderately unfair, because it's going to be members who ultimately pick the leader should there be a contest. I think it's fair for people to express views on who the new leader should be. I'm as entitled as anyone else to have an opinion in that regard. I've got very strong views because of the fact that I think we need someone who's experienced, someone who's a serious politician for serious times, and someone who has the ability to unite not just the party but the country, because this is about the public. John Swinney, in my eyes, is unsurpassable in that regard, and I hope he'll put himself forward.
And just finally, I mean, we talked about what the trigger of all of this turmoil was. That's obvious in the short term. And you mentioned the dignity with which Humza Yousaf always held himself, and he had a tough kind of brief to inherit. With that in mind, I mean, timing is everything in politics. To what extent is Nicola Sturgeon responsible for the turmoil the party finds itself in at the moment?
I think all of us have to reflect upon our role and where we are and how we've managed to get here. I actually think the First Minister took a very brave decision to break from what would have been an easy situation. It would have been very easy to say we're going to continue with the Butte House Agreement. We're going to settle for the fact that we're having some difficulties with the public in terms of our ability to engage with them. But he took a bold decision in the public interest. And I certainly hope that the next leader of the party, and I hope that would be John, will take us forward on a footing where we can go back to dealing with the biggest issues of the day. Like I said earlier, the economy, creating jobs, the NHS, and of course the cost of living crisis. We have a good story to tell, but we've got a much bigger story to come, and it's that future that matters.
Does this impact the Westminster general election coming up? You've got 43 MPs, I think, that you lead at the moment. Yeah. How many do you hope to have?
I hope to have 43 plus some, because when you go into an election, you aim to win as many seats as you possibly can. We know when it comes to Westminster voting intentions, we're neck and neck with the Labour Party. And we know that if we increase our poll numbers and then we increase the number of people who are going to vote for the SNP, then we'll return many, many more MPs right across Scotland. We provided that strong voice for Scotland, that distinctive voice for Scotland and Westminster, and long may that continue until, of course, we achieve our independence.
Stephen Flynn, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. The SNP's Westminster leader.